Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill, the state of the program for the Miami Hurricanes under Mario Cristobal. This has to be one of the more fascinating programs to do this episode for. And I'll be quite frank right off the bat, that probably not many people higher across the country on Mario Cristobal than I am. But we have to have a kind of a serious conversation where you like a lot of things that are going on with this Miami Hurricanes program, specifically on the talent acquisition front. There are certain things, player development, coaching staff hires, that I think a lot of Miami fans would be quite frank, just have not been good enough for Mario Cristobal during his time with the Miami Hurricanes. Want to take a bird's eye view approach in terms of where this Miami Hurricanes program is at and where they are going over the next couple of years. Before we get into it, as always, to the Miami Hurricane fans, let it fly in the comment section. A lot of different opinions that I've seen the Miami Hurricane fans have regarding Mario Cristobal, regarding where this program is. Let it fly in the comment section. I think this might be the most exciting program to have this conversation with. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, we got to start how you have to start evaluating any program, any head coach. That is what you're doing on the football field. Disappointing year one in 2022. I would say disappointing year two in 2023. And then 2024, you go 10-3. You have the best quarterback in the country. But at the same time, it did feel like a disappointment in 2024 as well. One thing I'll say right off the bat, sitting here saying 10-3, and we're talking about that being disappointing, I think that speaks to where Mario Cristobal might have this Miami Hurricanes program from an on the football field perspective. How are we feeling about Mario Cristobal and where he's at with this Miami Hurricanes program?
I think fundamentally the frustrating thing is you look at how talented these teams are, and frankly how well he's developed, especially the lines of scrimmage on both sides. It doesn't feel like they've done enough on the field, quite frankly, and maximize what they have. Obviously, this is a team I look at. They really shouldn't be losing a lot of ACC football games. They're just better than these other teams for the most part. They're more talented, and there's just been those really frustrating mistakes on both sides of the ball that have kind of prevented Miami from taking that step to being that perennial playoff team. So those have to get cleaned up, but just how they play and how dominant they can be when they're going, they need to avoid those terrible mistakes.
My biggest, yes, the mistakes. I think my bigger gripe with Mario Cristobal is the big games. You start looking at, all right, where the marquee wins coming from for this Miami Hurricanes team, and it's not a laundry list of those names. Now, that Florida win in 2024 to kick off that 2024 year was massive. It felt like it was a big one for the program. Texas A&M back in 2023. Got to put yourself in the positions to start notching those big wins. That's probably where I would start with the Miami Hurricanes.
And you can't lose games to Georgia Tech and Louisville, teams that, again, I feel like Miami for the most part outclasses, and then you lose them because, this year was obviously 100% about the defense. He just failed with the hire of Lance Guidry. But those are all those kind of things that there feels like that whole ship on the on-field play needs to just be tightened up because the players are there, the talent is there, everything's kind of there, but they've lost a lot of horrible.
That's a nice segue to talent acquisition, which has been by far the best thing to evaluate for Mario Cristobal. And what I love about what Miami has done is they're doing a very good job on the high school recruiting trail. And when they maybe don't do as good of a job on the recruiting trail, they supplement it with the transfer portal. They finished top 10 2 out of the 4 years. And I don't really count the 2022 year because that was kind of that year one. You don't have the whole time to build a class. It's clearly gotten better, right? 8th, 6th. And then in 2025, it takes a little bit of a dip, but then you supplement on the back end with the transfer portal. Talent acquisition, at least in my opinion, when you're evaluating talent acquisition, I think it starts with, are you putting this program in a spot where from a talent standpoint, you can compete for conference championships and can be competitive in the college football playoffs? I don't think anybody would argue that this team from a talent standpoint in 2024 wasn't good enough. They just didn't come together on the football field. Then you look at 2025 and say, it's hard to argue that talent isn't good enough to win the ACC in 2025 either. So from a talent acquisition standpoint, I do feel like Mario Cristobal is doing a damn good job with this program.
I think even from just a roster management stand, like the way I think marries the transfer portal with what he does on high school. Like when
Agreed.
he doesn't have a big time group of like that last year's defensive line wasn't going to be a good enough unit if they didn't go hit the portal. But then you look at what they do in 2024 on the trail, they bring in a bunch of 4 and 5 star guys on that defensive line. So like being able to identify where you're deficient, being able to fill the gap with the portal, but then being able to put the pipeline together that frankly you need to be able to put to make it a more consistent unit. You look same thing with the secondary. I mean, they had to overhaul that secondary this year. It was not going
Oh
to be
yeah.
good enough if they ran it back with what they had. They go out, add some good young players. I might add a couple of young guys in the portal, a couple of more veteran experienced guys. I look at the way he kind of turned that secondary around, along with the fact that he kept guys like Zaquan Patterson and OJ Frederick in the fold. Guys, I think you're confident in. I think he put that secondary in a position to again like be a little bit more sustained success, if you will.
The overall thoughts, because to me, it's one thing to look at the recruiting ranks, and it's another thing to talk about how we actually feel about this roster coming together. I love what they're doing along the line of scrimmage, right? And that 2023 class brought in a lot of hammers. And we'll get to the player development side, developing those guys too. And then on the defensive side of the football, this is going to be a big year, but you go back and look at that 2024 class, I would argue it was the best defensive line class that you saw in the country. Those are the two positions that if you told me or asked me, hey, what two positions on the high school recruiting trail are most important to get right at the high school ranks, it's the line of scrimmage play because it's hard to fill it routinely in the portal. The one knock on Mario Cristobal is quarterback recruiting and development. I think that's going to change with Luke Nickel. I think Luke Nickel's that guy. And yeah, I think Miami has missed. Like Judd Anderson, jury's still out. I didn't love that take. Emory Williams, the jury's still out. I actually have a little bit of confidence in Emory Williams. I really like Luke Nickel, and I really like Coleman coming in 2026. And then player retention has been solid. It hasn't been great. You lose guys like Isaiah Horton. You lose a guy like Brashad Smith, who was awesome for SMU this year. Talent acquisition to me is in a good spot for the Miami Hurricanes. Now, player development, this is probably the biggest conversation you want to have in terms of it needs to get better, in my opinion, if Mario Cristobal is going to be successful at Miami. And the best way, at least in my opinion, to evaluate it's like, hey, what are the NFL draft picks looking like? In 2024, pretty barren, and a guy like Matt Lee wasn't really a Miami Hurricane kind of guy. 2025, look, it gets better. You have some homegrown guys, Xavier Estrepo, Elijah Arroyo, guys like Jalen Rivers, but a lot of those guys were also portal additions. Now, the Cam Ward conversation, I will give Miami Cam Ward because Cam Ward took a massive step in 2024 in terms of what he was as a quarterback. He went from day 3 NFL draft pick to, in my opinion, should be going 1-1 in the NFL draft. The talent acquisition is coming. In my opinion, the player development needs to pick up if Miami wants to be that perennial national championship caliber program.
See, I actually kind of like where they're at with player development, mainly because I look at what they're doing on both sides of the line of scrimmage. Like they're building really, really good units, homegrown guys. Is again
Yeah.
supplementing with the portal, but I look at like the development of guys like Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, who looks like he's taking steps. And then hopefully, obviously, you see with guys like Lightfoot and Scott and some of those other young guys coming from the 24 class. Like we'll see what they are this year. But I look at what he's done to build dominant offensive lines. I kind of like where that with player development. Again, he's really young in his career. We just had this conversation with Dan Lanning and people jumping on him for the same things. I look at kind of where like the way Ruben Bain plays, the way Maui Noah plays, the way some of these young guys who you want to be your headline leaders, if you will, they're playing like they're headline leaders and they are being dogs.
This year in 2025 feels like a massive evaluation year in terms of player development because you look at those high school recruiting classes, 8th best class, 6th best class, a lot of really good line of scrimmage players. Can they be those dudes who can dominate football?
You look, I look, Maui Noah and Ruben Bain both probably have shots at being first round draft picks.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah,
and then Ruben Bain, like, yeah, you can argue about his traits, but he's playing round 1 level football.
100% agree. This year you need to see it. Coaching staff. This is, I mean, and player development and coaching staff kind of married, right? This is probably another you want to see him get this Corey Heatherman right because I think he got it right on the offensive side of the football, right? Shannon Dawson, to me, he's that guy. Alex Mirabal, we know what he does on the offensive line. That was reflected in 2024 with an elite offensive line, going to be reflected in 2025. Kevin Beard, for the life of me, gets flack on Twitter. Kevin Beard had a lot of production from them wide receivers in 2024, developed a guy like Xavier Restrepo. The defensive side of the football, right? And the Lance Guidry one was so weird because in 2023, I was like, man, I thought they had all run with Lance Guidry. Like that defense was playing, then all of a sudden just falls off a cliff in the 2024 year. Corey Heatherman's a big one. They arguably will dictate the tenure for Mario Cristobal at Miami. And then Jason Taylor's another one where it's like we talk about player development, that defensive line, Justin Scott, Armando Blunt, Marquise Lightfoot, Booker Pickett, Artavius Jones, another guy like. Can those guys take that step going into year 2? He's got the talent. I think that, to me, the jury's still out on Jason Taylor. The rest of that staff was not good, gone. Jason Taylor, are you that guy? We're going to find out in 2025 with what kind of defensive line you put out with some of this young talent in that room.
Yeah, and this might be his biggest issue so far in his tenure at Miami.
Agreed.
Because, again,
Missed
Josh
out a lot.
really, really weak
Horrible.
coordinator. Lance Guidry and Kevin Steele, frankly, both kind of weak on the defensive side. Like, they just haven't kind of hit those assistant coaches. Now, you like where you're going with Shannon Dawson for sure. Corey Heatherman, you're kind of right. Like, that will probably be a defining moment in his tenure at Miami, because if they miss again on the defensive staff, then that's going to be a real problem. And then I think you start the questions about what he can be and where he can take this Miami program are probably going to get a bit louder. But you got to give him the shot to make it work with Heatherman, because, again, I think Shannon Dawson, you're right, he's probably going to not go from Miami to another coordinator spot or get fired. He's probably going to be in line for head coach.
In 2025, this feels like such a big year and I'm not saying he's necessarily on the hot seat, but in terms of how I look at Miami under Mario Cristobal, what this team looks like in 2025 is going to dictate my opinion on where this Miami Hurricanes team is going. The last thing we'll talk about is trajectory here. Look, the fact that Miami fans had felt like it's a disappointing season going 10-3, I think tells you what you have to know about where Mario Cristobal is going, where the expectations are, hey, winning ACC championships, getting to the college football playoffs, and really winning national championships. I think that's where this team is at under Mario Cristobal, which is a plus if you're overall evaluating. I'll ask you where, like trajectory-wise, next 5 years, you selling or buying stock in the Miami Hurricanes the next 5 years?
I'm probably a slight buy, but again, this year feels like a monster year to me. Because frankly, like, again, my one real frustration is I feel like you've seen the same issues kind of pop up. Some game management things have obviously been left a lot to be desired. Again, you've missed on a handful of coordinators at this point. Corey Heatherman, I'm kind of like looking at him. Like, if he's that guy, look at that offense. I think that should be a really, really good unit again with Shannon Dawson, and obviously Beck coming in with all the pieces around the offensive line, the running back, the young wide receiving talent. This defense, it's talented enough now. There is no excuses. If Corey Heatherman can't make this work, well, then my opinion of Mario Cristobal will.
Yeah, the Miami Hurricane fans know this. I've been buying stock in this program for a while now. I could be a millionaire. I could be out on the streets after time. Like, I'm probably gonna know after this 2025 year. But
like the first game they play against like a good passing attack, we'll know, like, okay, this defense is kind of where it's supposed to be.
You played Notre Dame week 1. I can't wait for that football game. I don't know if it's a great passing attack, but 2025, we're gonna find out. It's gonna be fun. That's all I got here. Miami Hurricane. I think the most interesting part is hearing from the Miami fans. So I would love to hear from the Miami Hurricane fans in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.